Hey, folks, family, friends, supporters of the Common Sense Network. It's good to have you back. Welcome to this podcast, Let's Talk Common Sense with me, Mike Omani. We've had a break, and that's simply because a lot's been going on. I don't know if you've noticed, there's a lot happening right now. And so we took a break to think things through as an organization, to re-strategize, and now we're ready to go again. So thank you for listening to last 2 weeks ago, I think, the episode we put out called I Can't Breathe. It did very well. It sparked lots of debates, lots of conversations, but also I was inundated, it's probably a better word, with lots of messages of people who are navigating this kind of difficult season or period we're in. So thank you for all of that. I've got some announcements for us before we get started. One is we now have a Twitter channel and God, I sound like an uncle. We have a Twitter platform, Twitter account, that's it, and an Instagram account for this podcast. It's called LTCS Podcast. I need you to pause the podcast now and go and follow those two accounts. We need your help. As you know, we're starting from zero. So I want everyone listening now to please follow that account, and that way you can stay updated with everything we're doing here at Let's Talk Common Sense. Now, it's a great episode today because I've got a friend with me. His name is Victor Azubuike. He is a young professional working in the city, but also runs a charity, a social enterprise, a foundation. It's called My Brother's Keeper Book Club. And he goes into different communities and brings together young people in secondary school, I think, and they read together. They read powerful books. It shapes their minds. It allows them to leave their surroundings and really explore the full range of their thoughts and possibilities. It's an amazing project. I've been with it, or I've been watching it rather, since it started and seen all the lovely things it's achieved. Do you want to just add a bit more than that, Victor?
Let me just start by saying thank you for that. That's probably one of the best introductions of the book club that I've heard in a minute. So hi guys, my name's Victor. And ultimately what My Brother's Keeper Book Club aims to do is to empower young boys through literature. So we want them ultimately twofold: to express and kind of explore literature, and also to see themselves in literature. We believe that that's super powerful, and we believe that when you make space for yourself.
Just come closer to the mic. Struggling to hear you a bit.
Okay, when you make space for yourself in literature, then you have confidence. You also have the opportunity to express yourself with more empathy and understanding other people's lives as well. So that's ultimately what we've been doing. We have been in the Lift Youth Club. Shout out to the Lift Youth Club in Islington. We've been there for just over a year before the pandemic started, and now we're switching over to Zoom, and we're going to have a 6-week boot camp where we're going to be studying Small Island.
Yeah, and that's a book, a new book.
Yeah, it's a new book that came out, and it explores the Caribbean experience and the Windrush generation.
Got you. Powerful stuff. I mean, yes, I love Victor as a friend, but he's also here because we're going to be discussing a bit about corporates, corporations, but also young people in the future. One of the things we've done so far regarding Black Lives Matter is march, protest, debate. I've been so many places talking about statues being pulled down and what we do about, but we haven't talked about the future, namely what future will young people inherit and how do we prepare them for that? So this is one of those soul food conversations, I hope, where we get a chance to go deep into this topic of what's in the future for young people. Now, before we get started, top stories. Let's start with Katie Hopkins. As you may know, she's been permanently suspended from Twitter. For those who don't know who Katie Hopkins is, she's a, controversial, provocateur, conservative commentator. She's been now permanently suspended from Twitter for violating the hateful conduct policy. She has over 1 million followers. She's been retweeted by Donald Trump. I mean, that's not really a commendation. He retweets fake news as well as random people, but there you go. And here's what Twitter said. Twitter says, Keeping Twitter safe is top priority for us. Abuse and hateful conduct has no place on our service, and we will continue to take action when our rules are broken. Now, as you can imagine, her being cancelled or a profile being deleted caused quite a bit of controversy. Lots of folks in the right wing especially are talking about it. This is unfair. This is left-wing Twitter, again, doubling down on free speech. It's a political movement, Twitter, and we have to get rid of it. This comes, as you'll know, a few weeks after the US President Donald Trump's Twitter tweets had to have warnings placed on them, and some of them had to be hidden from general view. He was very angry about this. He vocalized it on his platform, and now a debate has really ensued about Twitter. Now, we had a conversation in the Commentators Network about this. As you know, we are a platform dedicated to bringing opposite sides together because, believe it or not, I believe you can win people over. I still believe through argumentation, listening to people, disagreeing but not being disagreeable, you can win people over. So we had a conversation, and there were some in the groups who greeted the news with cheers and gifs of people jumping up and down, going, woo, ding dong, the witch is dead, all that kind of stuff. But what I'm really worried about is what this does, because when we cancel people, even people who say provocative things, let's be clear, incitement to violence is different. That's illegal, and if you do that, you should be punished. But when we cancel people, especially figureheads of a movement, when they're gone, they just become martyrs. And typically what happens is those who support them dig their heels further into ideological trenches because now they can make the argument that Twitter's move is consistent with the suspicion they have that it's this left-wing movement that's trying to censor those on the right. So in a way, it entrenches people in their beliefs. It means we can't win people over. And unfortunately, it doesn't defeat her ideas. It doesn't defeat, she's not wrong. She's just going to say they didn't like the truth, so they cancelled me. Now, important to note as well, I'm a libertarian, and as such, Twitter's a private company, and if it wants to cancel anyone from, if anyone breaks their policies of use and they want to get rid of them, they can. And that's the best example someone gave me of this. If a pub bars a woman from drinking in that pub, she's not then banned from drinking. She just can't drink in that pub. So what she's got to do is find a different pub to drink at. So folks who go, this is against her human rights. No, there's other pubs, there's other platforms. She just can't use Twitter because guess what? It's a private company. Do you use Twitter, Victor?
Yes, I do.
And what do you think about this news of Katie Hopkins being banned?
I think ultimately it extends to the point that you provided in terms of it being a private company. So in terms of their terms and conditions, if you don't meet their terms and conditions, then they do kind of have the right to remove you from the platform. I then kind of go to the more social understanding of it, and I see that then that also emboldens her base. And I think that's probably going to be the scary thing coming forward, right? Because even though, for example, some people have made the comment that Trump has kind of tweeted on a similar line in terms of Katie Hopkins, but Twitter, even as a private company, dare not remove the president of the United States from the platform. So there's conversations as to kind of the treatment that's provided to these individuals and the offices they hold. But Katie Hopkins' base, if we look under the comments in terms of Sky News, on BBC News, they're still very much there.
Absolutely.
And they are definitely taking it.
And a new one probably will rise up. That's what happens. They go, hold on a minute. Our leader's gone. Well, this is the time for us to rise up against the Republic and things of that nature. It's really odd how Twitter used to be. Guys, do you remember? There was a time where Twitter was just an app. Now it's this lingua franca. It's this thing that you have to be on. Otherwise, you just can't have political debate. You just don't exist politically unless you have Twitter. This is a real problem. But you know what? Enough airtime for Katie Hopkins. Let's move on to the next topic. So the next headline is about Rishi Sunak, who has become somewhat of a celebrity now. We haven't had this before. We had Alistair Darling, who was a celebrity because his eyebrows didn't match his hair. You'll notice he had, I think, grey eyebrows but black hair, something like that. Rishi Sunak equally has got this cult following. People really like him, and they might like him again. Why? Because just days ago he announced his plans to cut VAT, and that's the hope is is rescue our ailing economy. But he's not just doing that alone. He's also going to pump billions into our economy as the government prepares to ease social distancing rules. Now, he ordered officials of the Treasury and HMRC. I know when I say HMRC, some people get triggered. You still have to be your taxes, folks. Just next year. But he's ordered them to prepare to reduce tax. As they seem, the idea, we don't know what they're going to cut tax to yet, but we know it's going to be lower than 20%. As you know, it's been 20% since January 2011. And for those who are worrying about, is this an unprecedented move? Well, there is precedent for it because after the 2008 crisis, Alistair Darling, who was then the Labour Chancellor, reduced VAT from 17.5% to 15% for 13 months. And that did aid the economy. Now, proposals that are going to hopefully work alongside this are the government's also thinking about extending for 3 months a scheme under which businesses can defer VAT payments to 2021. We're talking about zero rating on some products for a short time to stimulate demand, cutting employers' national insurance contributions to encourage bosses to hold on to staff, introducing an employer's national insurance holiday so that new staff, to encourage new staff being recruited. These are a portfolio of practices that hopefully will boost the economy. It's going to be good, I think, for the most part, mainly because, we've got to do something to rescue our economy. And the truth of the matter is, we've got to compete. And I think this helps us compete, obviously consistent with reducing social distancing policy. Now, reducing social distancing has been it's been oddly received online. Some folks are very happy about it. Of course, the UK, our culture here, we're very careful. And as such, a lot of people are thinking, hold on a minute, I don't want it to be reduced. But businesses need it reduced. Businesses in the hospitality industry simply cannot function with social distancing rules. It's got to come down to 1 meter from 2 meters. Now, there are mixed feelings about this 2 meters thing, going down to 1 meter. Victor, what do you feel about the social distancing potentially being reduced from 2 meters to 1 meter?
Are we still social distancing? Oh. Because when I am outside, the last thing I'm doing is mentally measuring 2 meters against someone else. But I think it's a fair shout, but I don't know how enforceable it is, and I don't know how many people are actually taking the time to measure a meter.
I mean, it's been really interesting. I mean, I live in Moss Side in Manchester. It's where we're recording this podcast. Just yesterday, we saw 2 people, literally a stone throw away from my house. We saw 2 people, unfortunately, lose their lives due to gang violence, we assume. There was a shooting, very dangerous. And essentially, I was at my, in my house, on the laptop, whatever, and I hear really loud music. And there's literally a street party happening. There's hundreds of people on the street, dancing, having fun, literally in a street party. And what I thought to myself? They are definitely not social distancing. It just seems as though people have just left it. And we've seen a couple of these parties pop up all across the country. There was one in London, I think, just last week, in a Labour MP's constituency. I think it was Dawn Butler. There was one in her constituency. She had to put out
Brent.
Yeah, it was in Brent. She put out a message saying, this is not right. Let's stop it, and so on and so forth. It's ridiculous. But hey, there you go. Now on to something that's equally just as striking. As you folks may know, there's been lots of conversations surrounding Black Lives Matter and what's next, essentially. We saw Edward Colston's statue comes down, Cecil Rhodes.
How did it come back out?
Well, it's now in a secure location. They took it down, protesters. They chucked it in the harbour. The local community, I guess local council rather, put it out and they put it into somewhere safe. But now, the next debate, if you like, and it's a debate that's been going on for a while. I was on BBC No Filter a few months ago talking about this debate as well, is one of reparations. What do we do about reparations? Now, folks, you can go on tcsnetwork.co.uk to read a new article by Richard Bolton, one of our journalists, where he asked the question, can reparations work? So anyone who's interested in the debates surrounding reparations, that's a great article to get you started. But just this week, two big companies, Lloyd's of London and Greene King, announced that they're going to make slave trade reparations. These are two major British firms, and they pledged to make payments to representatives of black people as well as those of other minority ethnic backgrounds. They said they want to do this because they really want to take seriously and address their founders' role in the transatlantic slave trade. Greene King is a pub chain, and Lloyd's of London is an insurance market. Both revealed to the public on Wednesday that this was what they were going to be doing. Now, this comes, as you all know, after George Floyd's death and all the subsequent debates that have erupted after that. When slavery was abolished in the British Empire in 1833, the government agreed to pay compensation, not to enslaved people, as we all know, but to the slaveholders. The records show that Greene King was given the equivalent of around £500,000 at today's rate because he surrendered the rights to plantations, right? He then handed control of his brewery to his son 3 years later, and it was given its current name after a merger in 1887. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that he was actually awarded £500,000 because he lost slaves. I don't know how I feel about reparations. We've gone back and forth on it in the network, but I don't know. Maybe you have a different perspective, Victor. I mean, do you think reparations can work? What are your thoughts? I know we don't want to do a deep nosedive, but what do you think about it, just generally?
I think on the surface, when we look at this issue, the first thing that kind of almost identifies as a very big question mark for the situation is, why is it and other minority ethnic? Because ultimately, in terms of the transatlantic slave trade, they were not impacted by it, right? Okay, you can speak to some extent to kind of India at the time, but in terms of the reparations going to black people, I think that's the conversation where it should start and where it should stop with black people. And then we can get into the conversation of how to distribute the money. But the very fact of the very matter is, I saw Lloyd's of London statement, and they were saying to black and minority other ethnics, and that really, really annoyed me, if I'll be very honest.
Well, I think that's the case with a lot of people. They said, hold on a minute, this is slavery. This is about black people. I mean, why are we talking about minority ethnic? I mean, a lot of people have a problem with the BAME title in general because it kind of lumps together a very diverse history. And in a way, it kind of erodes a lot of people's history because it just merges them together. You're just not white, essentially, and rather than
you saw Priti Patel. You saw Priti Patel in the Commons talking to she was a black Labour MP, and weaponizing to some extent her race and the thing she was basically saying, I'll tell you about racism, race and XYZ, and we have to understand and address and accept the fact that experiences, even amongst minority ethnic people, are vastly different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. I mean, the reparations debate, as we know, has been going on for a long, long time. Some key thoughts I think to think about. One is Professor Hamilton, who told the BBC that he supports reparations, but he supports it only as a symbolic gesture. Because the truth is, it's very, very difficult when you think about the simple pain of money. It just won't address the structural problem that America has, but also the UK has. What economist William Darity has said, and this is kind of where I sit, is he suggested perhaps what we need is a portfolio of reparations. This combines payment, yes, to payments to black people, but kind of like a universal basic income style, where every black person receives a £2,000 payment, something like that. But also black-orientated policies focusing on funding black education, healthcare, asset building, as well as ensuring public schools and teachers properly teach the full impact of slavery and really kind of explore the British checkered history when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade. Now, this is all very, very important because we're seeing corporations at least taking a step and reacting. We've seen lots of social movements on the street, and now we're moving to corporations. So I guess I want to ask you, Victor, you're someone who works in the bank, your day to day is, you're in the corporate world. How has all this talk, all these marches, all these conversations, how has it affected you kind of mentally? And what have you had to do where you work? I mean, give me a lowdown.
I think the one thing we always have to remember is the financial markets keep on going. Crisis from crisis, they still go, and people still want to have access to those markets. So I guess in my day job, nothing much has changed in my day job, if I'm being very honest. I would say what's happened is that now, more recently, there's been a conversation as to the nature of what's happening outside. I noticed that a lot of big organizations for the first week, they didn't want to get it wrong, which is fair. It could be a kind of PR disaster, reputational risk as well. But now there's conversations internally, especially kind of the bank I'm working for being an American bank. We are kind of having active conversations. Employees are being invited to Zoom calls with senior management and speaking about their experience. A lot of emotional conversations are taking place, and to be fair, I've never seen the corporate world in my 2 years as honest as it currently is now. So I guess that is a step forward. I'm speaking to managing directors who are telling me their children, it's something that their children are raising with them, attending protests, they're attending with them. So it's definitely feels like there's a wave of change. In regards to me, it was heavy. It was very, very heavy seeing it. And then the first week, I felt like there was a silence, and a few of the junior black colleagues, we spoke about this, addressed it with our various management teams, and then kind of came the flow of conversations from our senior management. But if I'm being very honest with you, Mike, I definitely had to step back for a bit. I had to jump off social media because it was something that was kind of taking a toll on me.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the fact that you took some time off because it was just a lot. And that's really, really important to do. In fact, I spoke to another banker and I asked him how it was affecting him, and here's what he sent in.
Yeah, in terms of my experience in the corporate world regarding all of the race issues, I wrote an email to my team and to my management around the time that George Floyd was killed. I expressed my reflections on what had happened, and basically the sentiment of my emails was, look, this is not a US issue. This is a global issue. It affects the UK, and guess what? It affects our company. I personally wanted to get across the truth that unconscious bias affects everyone, and microaggressions are very rampant in the UK. That then triggered a whole host of invitations to join meetings. We came up with a strategy of what individuals and colleagues can do, because everyone kept asking me questions of, okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? So I was, okay, well, fine. These are some things that you can do for now. But bear in mind that if this is something that you're concerned about, it's a continual process that you need to check yourself on, right? This is not just a one button fix for the issue of racism. It doesn't exist. You can't solve racism in one day. Anyway, I'm on a call. To give an example, I'm explaining all of this, for about 5 minutes, give my experiences, talking about, the fact that there's microaggressions and, all kinds of nonsense that happens at work. And at the end of the call, the person goes, oh yeah, that was very articulate. And it's just like, you're doing it right now. You're doing it right now, And so even as you're teaching people, as you're teaching colleagues, as you're giving them the resources, you've got statements like, we need to do all that we can to help, our black colleagues, to help them. You need to help, individuals need to help themselves. If you're not black, you need to help yourself as well in terms of your own unconscious biases. We're not one, dysfunctional people's group. We're able and competent people group who are helping ourselves, but you need to also help yourselves in progressing in this issue. So that's my view. A lot of responses, a lot of listening groups, but at the same time, there has to be, a sense of sober-mindedness to take time, slow down, and put things in place that will see us in the long term making headway in this issue of racism. In terms of mental health, I mean, to be honest with you, if anything, it's just reminded me that I have a voice, and that I'm happy to use it to speak about my experiences if it will change the heart or mind of one person. Because to be honest with you, a part of me gets fatigued thinking, oh gosh, how many calls do I have to do to explain why, or how racism has affected me? In a sense, you almost feel like you're one entertainer that's giving your 2 minute piece on race. But at the same time, I see on the other side of, well, if I don't say anything, then these individuals won't maybe know. People might be missing out on a particular experience that might trigger them to see things differently. And I'm saying, I've been saying, look, at the end of the day, if these conversations stay in the workplace, and they don't trickle out into your house, on the dinner table, with friends, family, when you're walking the dog, then nothing really changes. You're kind of nice when you come to work, and then when you go home, microaggressions become macroaggressions. So, for me, mental well-being, I think for me, it's if anything, at the beginning, obviously the scenes in the US, reflections on microaggressions and racism in the UK. Of course, it's definitely not been good. It's definitely made me more sort of solemn and yeah, definitely more, I guess the sense of grief. But in terms of the corporate world, still holding my head up, still not relying on my race as a crutch to for people to feel sorry for me. No, not really. I think I already have a good sense of identity and confidence. But if anything, this whole experience has shown me that, look, there are ignorant people out there. I want to say something, and I'm happy to say something. And I'm not going to be depressed about that. I'm going to be bold enough to say something, and if it changes someone's opinion, then great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. But yeah, so mental well-being wise, I've been okay, really. It is a bit tiring, but at the same time, I think there is purpose in saying something. But then it's up to people to make something happen with the information they've been given. So yeah, that's my own personal experience anyway.
I mean, that's really interesting.
Wow.
What he's saying there, because ultimately, everyone's different is the point. It doesn't really matter. And this is something that's also happened, I think, in lots of different companies up and down the country is, everyone thinks every black person is like an expert, as it were, on black culture and black history. And they're like, tell us about structural racism. You go, I'm a hairdresser.
Which is once again, ironically, a symptom of racism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Depression.
The notion that you're talking about, white structures that, are now co-opting the conversation and providing the platform for the debate. It's like, well, no, I don't want to have to do. I had a really interesting exchange with somebody who sent me a video of this was a white person. I wouldn't describe them as a friend because I've really never had a conversation with them. But they sent me a video summarizing their thoughts on the issue, and they're like, can you watch this and tell me what you and he said something like, I'm quite interested in this topics and these topics, and I just thought, no, I don't want to watch your video for a number of reasons. I mean, there's just so much to go into that it just felt a bit like, well, I don't have to watch your video.
Yeah.
I mean, what makes you think I have to watch your video, be interested? But also, what also makes you think your opinion is valid or important or should be considered right now? Is this assumption that, if I have a thought, everyone must consider it? And so, well, no, they don't have to. And if it's affecting my mental health, if I'm not healthy, I don't have to get involved in that, But enough about what's happened. Let's talk now about the future. So you spend, some evenings in local communities bringing together young black boys. Is it minority ethnic boys or young black boys?
That's a good question. Minority ethnic boys as well.
Okay, cool. Minority ethnic boys. And you guys are discussing books, you're discussing the future. How has this affected them in your conversations?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So just to give a bit of background, we run, along with some of my friends that are other professionals in the city, we run an organization called My Brother's Keepers Book Club. And in that, we aim to encourage and inspire our young people that attend our sessions to engage and explore literature. And ultimately, it's twofold. We want them to have a shared empathy of the world in which when they come across different characters, they'll be able to relate. But we also want them to see themselves in literature. And we believe that that's a powerful tool in navigating the world. When you see yourself in books, when you see yourself being talked about, when you see a space created for you, ultimately, it provides you with a lot more dignity and confidence to navigate the world. So we definitely, when we saw the George Floyd incident, we touched base with them and they provided some unique and interesting responses. A lot of them were talking about naturally the graphic representation of racism in America and not necessarily having the same here. We had to speak to them and kind of make them aware, even when they were uncovering the conversation, they were realizing that racism still exists here, but it's a lot more covert, as everyone said, a lot more insidious and pernicious. And that's something that these boys are quickly recognizing. But at the same time, and I don't know how you feel about it, Mike, but we also have to inspire hope in them, because we also want them to feel that they can navigate this world and they can bring the change that ultimately can come. In this moment, it seems very heavy.
And how is that going? Do they feel optimistic? Do they feel like they can change the world? I mean, I've had to think about this with my little brother. Like, does he feel empowered to actually create a new world, or is he kind of, doom and gloom? So, generally speaking, when you have your conversations, what's the mood?
One thing we noticed, and maybe it's background, maybe it's just community and culture, but these boys don't think they can change the world, because a lot of the time the conversations that they have around them, it's almost like the world is a separate vehicle that they're not a part of. They operate in their communities, but they don't have access to the world as a whole. Yeah. So ultimately, we have to begin the conversation that, no, you are part of the world, right? And you have proximity to change the world. And that's the hard part of the conversation. But one thing I remember, and I take a lot of joy in, is when we was reading Things Fall Apart by the writer Chinua Achebe, and one of the boys spoke about how this empowered him as a black boy. He had never seen the protagonist Okonkwo and just conversations about Nigerian culture in a book, and then when was given the history of it and given the kind of how the critical acclaim of the actual book, he was surprised to see that it's probably one of the best-selling books in print. So things like that encourage them, but it's definitely a long journey. And I would encourage everyone, if you have proximity, to get engaged on the ground, because there are a lot of young people ultimately who are going to kind of go through the systems. We know what education looks like, we know what the criminal justice system looks like as well, and they're going to have to navigate these places. So if you've got proximity to them and you have an understanding of kind of how pernicious and covert racism and structural racism is in the UK, then it's good to guide them along that, so that they can ultimately get to the point where they can facilitate change.
You're so correct. I mean, I'm so encouraged hearing that from you, because one of the things I've seen, and it's a big divide, is between age and how people are dealing with this. I made the joke 3 times now about, when I ask my mum, and I say my mum, who's a black woman, black Nigerian woman, when I ask her, mum, what do you think about all this stuff? She's like, yeah, it's bad, but she's just kind of done almost. She's seen this all her whole life. She's fighting probably in different ways, but she's just not there. But when you look at young people, they have this ridiculous energy and drive. I mean, there has been protests in London and across the UK for the last 4 weekends. People are not stopping. They're not relenting. Young people have this unrivaled passion because they actually have more of the world left to live.
And we remind them at our sessions exactly on this point that the power of youth is their ignorance of what's impossible. Yeah. They don't have an understanding of what's impossible. And ultimately, every generation of young people continue to push the baton forward.
Yeah. And they're reimagining systems. They're actually thinking about systems change. I mean, a lot of old people probably older folk probably concede that, we can probably make things a bit better. Maybe if we lower the prison population a bit, that would be okay. Whereas you've got young people who are thinking, no, let's. I mean, look at Bernie bros.
Abolish prisons
for all their problems. People saying, let's defund the police. Let's have a totally different police system. Rather than having police officers who are trained like they're at a war zone, why don't we get some mental health professionals and psychologists and psychiatrists? And this is just revolutionary. But young people are saying, listen, let's try this out. And why shouldn't they say that? I had to check myself as well, because, you become a bit of an old, this is how systems change and this is how things get done. And I was like, well, yeah, because you had a certain education. But here's a young person who has a totally different view. Like, when I first read Defend the Police, I thought, oh, here we go. Like, no, that's not going to work. Until I read more into it and I thought, well, Maybe in some places that could work.
kind of got a
Maybe
point.
not nationally. I do think you need police. Otherwise, let's not assume everyone black is just law-abiding, everyone white is law-abiding. No.
But to swap it with community-led programs.
But community-led programs, community policing, kind of fixing that relationship between the police and the public, especially in America.
Yeah.
It's something that needs to be done. So I'm so encouraged to see you're doing the good work. You're actually speaking to these young people. You're encouraging them. What's next for MBK Books? Like what can people look forward to, or even how can people support?
Yeah, so feel free to follow us on our social media. Hopefully, you can put the information on the podcast information. Yeah, 100%. But our Instagram is MBK, so MBK Books _. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. And what we're trying to do at the moment is we are taking literature, ultimately a lot of the time black literature, and we are creating 6-week project plans that will ultimately be shared at the beginning of this upcoming school term. And we want to share it with PRUs, we want to share it with schools, we want to share it with youth clubs, we want to share it with community-led organizations, so that they've got 6-week projects that can ultimately facilitate this change. So the books we're covering is Small Island, Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, Things Fall Apart Naturally, as I said, also GCSE friendly literature. So we're looking at Frankenstein, Wuthering Heights. We want to bring that context to low socioeconomic boys and boys from black and minority ethnic communities, so that they can engage with literature. Our vision is for boys from low socioeconomic backgrounds to be the most active and engaged readership population in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a big goal. It's an important goal, and I hope you succeed, and I'm going to do everything I can to ensure you do.
Thank you.
So amazing work as always, folks. Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe. If it's your first time listening, share this on Twitter. The hashtag is LTCS, and please remember, follow this new podcast. It's on Twitter. It's on Instagram too. LTCS podcast. Follow us. Be part of the conversation. Have a wonderful week, and catch you in the next one. Take care.